There wasn't coercion. What there was a whole lot of damn evidence. And it's unfortunate that, these movies, documentaries, and Netflix series do not show the evidence. So let's go over the evidence. When those kids came out of the park, they were confronted by Officer Reynolds and his partner and the other female officer who was on the scooter. They were able to catch 5 of them: Michael Briscoe, Kevin Richardson, Santana Lopez, and Clarence Thomas. Out of those young men, Clarence Thomas gets put in the backseat of the car and starts crying.
2 of the kids were crying and saying, "I didn't do the murder, but I know who it was. It was Antron McCray, and I'll tell you where he lives."
Did you start to cry in the police car?
Yes.
And did you start to say something to the police?
That's when I began to ask, yes.
Did you say that you knew who the murderer was?
After they had said that the person was essentially dead, then I said that.
What did you say to him?
I said that I know the person who killed him. I was crying and stuff because I remember as they came back, I seen Antron with the pipe, and they were saying that he was beaten over the head, and I figured it was Antron since he came back with the pipe.
Did you tell the police it was Antron?
Yes.
Now, when they said they didn't do the murder, my assumption, we all assumed, that they were talking about the gentleman, and this guy was a teacher, his name was John Laughlin. We thought they were talking about him because he was beaten so badly, we assumed that they thought they killed him.
So this is the beginning of these kids beginning to incriminate themselves. And a lot of people think that the police coerced these kids into talking about this stuff, and they did not. They offered up this information voluntarily, as you just saw with Clarence Thomas. He admitted to beginning to cry in the police car, and automatically he goes into telling on himself, telling on everybody else that's there. Who starts to snitch next? And the next person who starts to confess is Kevin Richardson. They had found the body of Patricia Miley. Well, I wouldn't say body because she was alive, but they found her very badly beaten. And so they needed to find out if anybody who was in the park at that time saw anything. So they wanted to question the boys because that's just police procedure. So they questioned 2 of them, Clarence Thomas and Lamont McCall, with their parents, and they didn't know anything. So they let them go home. Kevin Richardson was the 3rd person that they questioned, and Kevin Richardson had a scratch on his face. So the police asked about the scratch.
Now, contrary to popular belief, we did not ask him about the female jogger. That's not the way that we operate. We get their full statement first, and then we go back and we ask them more questions. And the thing that we do is we get the answers before we ask them the questions. This way we know when they're lying. He had a scratch under his eye, and one of the detectives said to him, "Well, how did you get that scratch?" And he said that my partner Bobby scratched him when he was arresting him. So the detective said to him, "Okay, Bobby's next door. I'm going to go ask him, and you had better be telling the truth." At that point, Kevin Richardson said, "Okay, it was the female jogger that scratched me." When he said that, because none of us were expecting it, it was almost like a bomb went off. Now we realized, okay, we got a different problem on our hands. We just let 2 of them go.
So this point is very significant because they didn't tell Richardson about the jogger. He didn't know about the female jogger. He simply gave that information up. Now, this is what sunk the ship. The whole Central Park 5 ship was sunk by Kevin Richardson in this moment. And you have to remember, when Corey was giving his testimony, he also talked about Kevin getting scratched in the face by the lady.
Steve ripped up hers with his knife. That's what made her mad. And that's when she started scratching him. What's the name? Kevin.
Now, when did they get together and share this story to tell the police officers? Now, if you watch the Burns documentary, they act like he got hit by an officer and this never happened. But then you have to think about how they two would get together and come up with concoct this story of him getting scratched by the jogger. Both Corey Wise mentioned his face getting scratched, and he mentions it himself. And then later, when they're doing the documentary, they act like this never happened, like they never came up with this stuff. It's amazing. Now, this is what the Netflix series doesn't tell you. This is what the Ken Burns documentary doesn't tell you. This isn't what the Central Park 5 book tells you. None of them tell you this significant piece of information, but it is the loose lip that sunk the ship, so to speak. And they all went on to tell on one another. These guys are the most celebrated snitches in Black history. But eventually, it wasn't just about them talking on camera or behind closed doors. At some point before he was picked up, Corey Wise was telling people in the street that the police were looking for him. He was approached by two of his friends, Ronald Williams and Shabazz Head. They were told by Wise to get the hell away from them because the police were after him. So they walked away. But a little while later, they ran into him again and they asked him why the police were actually after him. And Wise responded, "You heard about that woman that was beat up and raped in the park last night? That was us." So he told Shabazz Head and Ronald Williams this, who later got on the stand and testified to this. Later, just before the trial, Corey was on the phone with Melody Jackson, who is the sister of one of his friends, and he called from jail. So apparently, Melody didn't want Corey to do any prison time. She wanted his court case to go well. She took this call from Wise from Rikers Island when he was in Rikers. She asked him, "Hey, Corey, did you do what the newspapers are saying that you did?" Corey's response to her was that he didn't rape anyone. He only held her legs down while Kevin huffed her. Now, this woman, Melody Jackson, thought that this information would be helpful to Corey because it proves that Corey was innocent. He didn't have sex with the woman. However, we all know that holding a woman down while someone else penetrates her it makes you an accomplice. So you are an accomplice to rape. So even with her doing that, and she did testify as well. She had testified to this had this conversation, and the phone records do show that he made that phone call. It also must be noted that none of the boys admitted to having sex with the jogger. They may have simulated sex, but they didn't penetrate her.
Then you got on top of her. Did you have your pants down when you did that?
No.
Did you have your fly open?
Yeah, but my penis wasn't in her.
What happened?
I just, my penis wasn't in her. I didn't put nothing in. I didn't put nothing to her.
Well, when you got on top of her, you got on top of her so that you could have sex with her, right?
Not really. I just doing it so everybody know. I wasn't really doing it.
You said you were just doing it so that everybody what?
Everybody just know I did it.
Well, how long did you, when you got on top of her, you had your penis out of your pants?
Yes.
And it was between her legs?
No.
It was against her?
Yeah.
And did you rub against her?
Yeah.
Did you have an erection?
No.
There was also lots of other evidence, blood evidence, which again doesn't get mentioned by the media. So there were blood stains on Santana's right sneaker, Yusuf Salam's jacket, and on Lopez's underwear. There were also semen stains that were found in the underwear of McCrae and Richardson. And somehow Santana had semen on his sweatshirt. And then there was the evidence of hairs. They found hairs that were consistent with the female jogger's hair on Kevin Richardson's clothing and on Stephen Lopez. If that wasn't enough, you also had soil on the victim, McCrae, Santana, and Richardson. Now, it should be noted that DNA evidence was a new science. It had only first begun to be used in 1985 overseas and came to America in 1987. That's just 2 years before the Central Park case. Furthermore, the methods used to get trace evidence changed considerably in the 1990s. So in this particular case, you find that there's a lack of conclusive evidence on the blood. So all the blood that's found on them, for the most part, was inconclusive. They don't know whose blood it was. But the fact that they had blood on them at all, and semen, should give you some amount of pause, especially when some of it was found in their underwear. So as you can see, along with the testimony, you had physical evidence. Why is that not in the Netflix series? Why is that not in the newsreels? Why is that not being asked of these guys when they do interviews? Because people don't want to hear the truth, that's why.